Imagine waking up in the middle of the night and seeing the sky glowing with an electric blue light. No thunder, no lightning, no sound, just a strange, silent glow, and death hiding in plain sight. That's exactly what many residents of Pripyat witnessed on April 26, 1986, without realizing they were staring at the beginning of one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. But what if I told you that what happened that night is just the surface of a much deeper and darker truth? Reports vanished, scientists disappeared, and even today some areas within the so-called dead zone remain completely off-limits. Not because of radiation, but because there's something there no one wants you to see. The secrets of Chernobyl aren't just conspiracies, they're suppressed facts, truths buried under concrete, silence and fear. And today, we're uncovering every single one of them. If mysteries like this get your attention, hit that subscribe button. We reveal everything they don't want you to know. On the morning of April 26, 1986, no one in the small Soviet city of Pripyat had any idea that their lives were about to be erased from the map. Not by war, not by an invasion, but by something invisible, silent, and far more insidious. At exactly 1:23 a.m., the reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded during a late-night safety test. What followed was chaos. A radioactive fireball, a rising plume of deadly smoke, and levels of radiation thousands of times higher than Hiroshima. The official story is well known. The Soviet government claimed it was an accident caused by operator error, a tragic but isolated event. Thousands were evacuated. A 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established. And the world moved on. But behind the scenes, things didn't add up. Why did it take more than 36 hours to evacuate Pripyat when the radiation was lethal within minutes? Why were the first firefighters not warned about radiation and sent in with no protection? Why were families allowed to stand on bridges and rooftops watching the glow, the very glow that would later kill them? In the days and weeks following the explosion, strange patterns emerged. Entire documents were classified and sealed. Journalists were silenced. Photos were destroyed or altered. Witnesses who spoke out were reassigned or simply disappeared. A few whispers began to circulate among survivors and insiders. This wasn't just a disaster, it was a cover-up. Because Chernobyl wasn't just about a faulty reactor, it was about something far more dangerous: human arrogance, political desperation, and secrets so dark they had to be buried deep beneath steel and lies. And now, it's time to unearth them. Chernobyl's Reactor 4 wasn't just dangerous, it was a ticking time bomb, and some people knew it long before the explosion. The RBMK reactor design used at Chernobyl was unique to the Soviet Union. It was powerful, cheap to build, and adaptable to both energy production and, here's the catch, weapons-grade plutonium extraction. But it had a fatal flaw, a positive void coefficient. In simple terms, under certain conditions, the reactor became more reactive when things got too hot. Instead of slowing down, it sped up. In nuclear physics, that's a death sentence. And the worst part? Scientists had warned about this for years. Reports dating back to the 1970s detailed potential catastrophic failures in the RBMK system. These weren't fringe opinions. They came from respected physicists within the Soviet nuclear program. But their concerns were buried, labeled classified, or ignored. Admitting the flaw would have meant halting production, dismantling reactors, and, most terrifying of all for the USSR, revealing to the world that their nuclear pride was deeply flawed. Some scientists who tried to speak out were reassigned, blacklisted, or pressured into silence. Others simply vanished from the academic landscape. To this day, declassified memos show how internal engineers begged their superiors to fix the design. They were told it would damage national image to admit fault. So instead, they gambled with millions of lives and lost. But that was just the first secret. Because what happened on the night of the explosion wasn't even supposed to happen at all. Officially, the explosion at Reactor 4 was blamed on a failed safety test conducted by inexperienced workers. But the deeper you dig, the more that version of the story begins to crumble. The test was meant to simulate a power outage, to see if, in case of emergency, the reactor's turbines could keep cooling the core long enough before backup generators kicked in. But the test wasn't supposed to happen that night. In fact, it had been cancelled earlier that day. So why was it suddenly reactivated hours later under rushed and unstable conditions? According to leaked transcripts and declassified reports, the pressure came from high above. Soviet officials were eager to prove the plant's reliability. Delays were seen as signs of weakness. The operators, some of whom were barely trained, were under immense pressure to perform the test at any cost. They disabled key safety systems. They ignored rising temperatures. Alarms were dismissed as malfunctions. The chain of events that followed wasn't just a technical failure. It was a recipe for annihilation, pushed forward by politics, fear, and blind obedience. And here's the chilling part. There were warnings. Engineers from other plants had already flagged that this exact type of test could trigger a critical reaction. The USSR ignored them. Some even believe the explosion wasn't entirely accidental, that it was a calculated risk gone wrong, or worse, a desperate demonstration of Soviet might at the height of Cold War tensions. Whatever the truth, the real story was locked away for decades, until former insiders began to speak and revealed just how deep the cover-up really went. But while the world focused on the explosion, another tragedy was unfolding quietly, one that left no ruins, no flames, just silence and suffering. While the world's eyes were on the burning reactor and the heroic firefighters battling the radioactive inferno, a far more insidious catastrophe was unfolding in silence, one that the official reports almost never mention. In the days following the explosion, tens of thousands of civilians, men, women, and children, continued their lives as if nothing had happened. They went to school, worked, walked their dogs, celebrated birthdays, all while invisible clouds of radioactive isotopes passed over them. Many were never warned. Others were told it was just steam or a minor incident. By the time the evacuation order came, 36 hours later, it was already too late. Their bodies had absorbed lethal doses of radiation, but here's where it gets darker. Hospitals in nearby towns like Kiev and Gomel began admitting patients with strange symptoms. Massive internal burns, skin melting off without fire, organ failure within hours. These weren't isolated cases. Thousands poured in, and then records began to vanish. Entire hospital wings were sealed off. Doctors were transferred or silenced. Medical files were destroyed. Families were told their loved ones died from unrelated illnesses, and children, especially children, began to show bizarre conditions, bone deformities, rapid onset cancers, genetic mutations. Unofficial estimates suggest the real number of victims may be hundreds of thousands, far beyond the 31 officially recognized deaths at the time. In Belarus alone, cancer rates in children tripled within a decade. Some towns reported birth defects so severe that doctors refused to document them. And to this day, there are families who don't even know that radiation was the cause of their suffering. Because for the Soviet government, admitting to these deaths would mean accepting responsibility, not just for an accident, but for a silent massacre. And while these victims were buried quietly, the zone itself was changing. Something unnatural was taking root in the radioactive soil. After the explosion, the Soviet government declared a 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the Chernobyl plant, a no-man's land, sealed off for decades due to extreme radiation. On paper, it was abandoned, empty, dangerous. But the truth? The zone was never truly empty. From the very beginning, strange activity continued behind the fences and warning signs. Satellite images taken by Western intelligence in the late 80s and 90s showed unusual construction deep within the zone. New roads, underground structures, even heat signatures from what appeared to be large equipment in use, in an area supposedly too deadly for life. Locals who returned illegally, known as self-settlers, whispered of soldiers patrolling at night, of vehicles entering and leaving through hidden checkpoints, and of entire facilities that didn't exist on any official map. Some believe the area became a clandestine research hub, a place where scientists could experiment without oversight. Radiation provided the perfect excuse to keep outsiders away. And what better cover for secret military projects than a zone where no one is allowed to ask questions? Then there are the reports, unconfirmed but chilling, of researchers who entered the Red Forest to collect data and never came back. Their last radio transmission spoke of equipment failures, strange readings, and a sense of being watched. In 2010, a team of European scientists gained limited access to a remote section of the zone. What they found stunned them. Traces of rare isotopes not linked to the original explosion, evidence of recent activity, and sealed tunnels that appeared to lead far underground, blocked by reinforced doors and motion detectors. To this day, no official explanation has been given, because maybe the real danger in Chernobyl isn't just radiation. Maybe it's what's still happening there, behind the fences, beneath the soil, in total secrecy. But the most unsettling secret of all wasn't built by man. It was born out of the fallout. Right after the explosion, one of the first places to be utterly devastated was the forest directly downwind of Reactor 4. Within hours, the trees turned a sickly orange-red, their needles scorched not by fire but by radiation. It became known as the Red Forest, a place so contaminated that even today, standing there for a few hours could kill you. But in the shadows of that poisoned forest, something else began to emerge. Over the years, there have been countless reports from soldiers, scientists, and even illegal explorers, the so-called stalkers, of strange sightings near the Red Forest. Descriptions vary, but the themes are eerily consistent. A tall, humanoid figure with elongated limbs, glowing eyes, and an unnatural gait. Some say it emits a low-frequency hum, enough to disrupt radios and cause nausea. Others claim it moves with impossible speed, vanishing the moment you look directly at it. At first, these stories were dismissed as radiation-induced hallucinations, stress, paranoia, but then came the photos. Blurry, yes, but showing a figure that doesn't match any known animal. One image, leaked in 1997 by a former military technician, shows a heat signature in the shape of a bipedal form, in an area with no humans present. There are even rumors of Soviet experiments gone wrong, genetic testing on animals and humans, using the radioactive environment to induce rapid mutation. If that's true, then what lives in the Red Forest might not be a creature born of nature, but of desperation and secrecy. In 2009, a group of explorers uploaded footage from deep inside the forest. In the last few frames before the video cuts abruptly, there's a figure, tall, dark, and motionless, watching them from between the trees. The group never posted again. To this day, some believe the Red Forest is haunted. Others think it hides a mutant species unlike anything the world has seen. And a few whisper of something even worse, that it's not just alive, it's evolving. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. Chernobyl didn't just unleash radiation. It unleashed something we were never meant to find. By the way, if stories like this keep you hooked like they do for us, make sure to hit the like button and tell us in the comments, which of these secrets shocked you the most so far? For decades, the official version of Chernobyl was treated like a closed case, a tragic error, a lesson learned. But behind that narrative, a web of silence was slowly unraveling. In the early 2000s, documents began to surface, leaked by former Soviet officials, whistleblowers, even hackers. Internal memos showed that high-ranking party members were warned of the reactor's instability years before the explosion. Transcripts revealed emergency meetings held the day after the disaster, not to plan evacuations, but to contain information. Then came the testimonies, from soldiers sent in with no protection, from scientists whose research was confiscated, from journalists who were arrested for asking too many questions. One of the most shocking revelations came from a former KGB officer who defected in 2004. He claimed that the Soviet Union maintained active surveillance on anyone who discussed anomalies inside the exclusion zone, especially those related to wildlife mutations, underground facilities, and the so-called creature. According to him, these were considered state secrets of the highest level, but the consequences of these secrets weren't confined to the past. Multiple reactors of the same RBMK design continued operating for decades after Chernobyl. In 1991, a similar near meltdown occurred in Lithuania, avoided only by sheer luck. To this day, some of those reactors are still active, retrofitted, but fundamentally built on the same flawed design. And there's more. In 2022, satellite footage showed a renewed military presence near the Chernobyl zone, days before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Analysts speculated they weren't just reclaiming land, they were securing whatever still lies beneath Reactor 4. What if the truth about Chernobyl has less to do with what happened, and more to do with what was discovered in the aftermath? What if that explosion opened a door to something the world was never meant to see? Something they're still trying to contain. Chernobyl is often remembered as a warning, a moment when humanity paid the price for its own recklessness. But what if it's more than that? What if Chernobyl isn't just a monument to the past, but a mirror reflecting the secrets we still bury today? Because the most haunting part of this story isn't the explosion. It's the silence, the unanswered questions, the sealed files, the people who disappeared without a trace. We like to think we know everything, that history is written, explained, archived. But Chernobyl reminds us how much can be hidden behind uniforms, locked doors, and official statements. And if these 5 secrets were kept for so long, how many others are still out there? How many more zones are quietly pulsing beneath the surface, not with radiation, but with truth? If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of Chernobyl, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what part of this story will stay with you the longest. Until next time, keep questioning everything.